Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 276. Stop fooling around. Meng Hao's face was pale as he sat cross-legged in the Immortal's cave. A few days later, he finally opened his eyes. They shone with a brilliant light. However, his brow remained furrowed for quite some time before finally relaxing. "I injured my soul," he murmured. He could sense a sinister coldness within him, an iciness which filled him through and through. In the cultivation of foundation establishment, the cultivation base is related to the Tao pillars. Spiritual sense is born, as well as the sea of perception and the cultivation soul. That soul would become the foundation for the future nascent soul. Right now, though, Meng Hao could faintly sense that his soul had been pulled out of place, a price paid for the use of the flag of three streamers. Such an injury would be difficult to recover from. An injury of the flesh would naturally recover through rest and recuperation, or through the use of medicinal pills. However, an injury of the soul could not be healed in such a way. Battling and slaying core formation had been an impressive feat, but as far as Meng Hao was concerned, the level of difficulty was far too high. Even with a 10th Tao pillar, it had been extremely difficult. There was simply too great a difference between foundation establishment cultivators and core formation cultivators, especially those who had cultivated core qi. In truth, he was not really qualified to challenge a core formation cultivator. Even with a perfect foundation and 8 Tao pillars, his fight with the Azure Masked cultivator had been too challenging. He had used every trick he could think of just to hold his opponent off. It seemed as if he hadn't been defeated, but in truth, the power had existed to destroy him. If any more time had passed, then he would have been vanquished in spectacular fashion. Thankfully, his 9th Tao pillar had appeared, and then the situation changed for the better. Of course, that is what Meng Hao had been aiming for. The intense life or death struggle was what had caused the qi in his body to multiply, enabling him to break through the bottleneck and increase his cultivation base. The need for battle was what had prompted Meng Hao to attack in the first place. Without the 10th Tao pillar, and completing the great circle of the perfect foundation, he would have been incapable of killing the core formation cultivator. At best, he would have been able to fight a bit longer. Once the 10th Tao pillar appeared, however, the vast gap between foundation establishment and core formation, which was like that between heaven and earth, had been narrowed by perhaps half. That jump caused the battle prowess of his cultivation base to leap up, far exceeding that of foundation establishment, and approaching core formation. The fact was, even with power reaching halfway to core formation, the most he could do would be to tangle with a core formation cultivator. He would never be able to slay one. Similarly, although his opponent would occupy a superior position, they wouldn't find it easy to slay him. What had truly changed the tide had been the flag of three streamers, that precious treasure which resided inside the blood-colored mask. The treasure had existed for an indeterminable period of time within the Blood Immortal Legacy Zone. One of its streamers was sealed with the character G. Its power was clearly enough to shake heaven and earth, and the Blood Immortal of the ancient Doom clan had desired to use it to drink the blood of the G. Meng Hao remembered the meat jelly's shocked reaction upon first seeing the flag. Considering all of that, how could Meng Hao not realize how astounding it was? In reality, he did not have the requisite cultivation base to even touch the treasure, let alone employ its power. However, once his 10th Tao pillar appeared, he had been able to sense the parched call of the flag of three streamers. Now that he thought back, he realized that its thirst was a thirst for destruction. In fact, instead of saying that Meng Hao had employed the power of the flag of three streamers, it would be more accurate to say because of Meng Hao's new qualifications, the flag was able to borrow his hands and his power to appear once again in the sky. Furthermore, instead of saying that Meng Hao had slain a core formation cultivator, it would be more accurate to say that the flag of three streamers was the one to exterminate the Azure Masked cultivator. Even the appearance of just one of the flag's three streamers caused Meng Hao's cultivation base to wither, and had injured his soul. That moment in which he had hovered in mid-air, facing down the Blacklands cultivators and the crowds from the southern domain, everything about him had appeared normal. In reality, he had been extremely weak. Thanks to the transformation powers of the meat jelly, he had been able to force out the sensation of a powerful aura. No one had been able to sense even the slightest clue as to his true state. Considering that and their other misgivings, no one had dared to make a move against him. In addition, the flag of 3 streamers hadn't even fully appeared. It had only been a phantom image that appeared to be a divine ability. Therefore, most people had assumed that it was not a magical treasure, but some technique. Furthermore, no one had made a connection between him drying up the Dao geyser and the appearance of the flag. Upon waking up just now, he had spit up a glob of impure qi, and his eyes had begun to shine. His cultivation base was now recovered by 80 to 90%. Based on how fast it was going, it wouldn't be long before it was completely recovered. The injury to his soul, however, was impossible to deal with. He could only exercise caution and not cause any further injury. Injuring the soul is like sowing karma. If the day comes in which I can break into the nascent soul stage, then the karma will be reaped. Meng Hao sat there thoughtfully for a moment, then took a deep breath and slowly stood up. He walked out of the Immortal's cave to find that it was raining again. The murmuring rain carried with it the cold of autumn. Meng Hao stared off into the distance, his long azure robe fluttering in the rainy wind. Core formation. His eyes glittered. There was really no need to think of the difficulty of reaching the nascent soul stage. Suddenly, he thought of Wang Tongfei's Dao protector, the core formation cultivator Wang Shifan. All those years ago, a mere glance from him had nearly killed Meng Hao. As of now, Meng Hao was confident that if he faced him again, the man would be stunned. Lost in thought, Meng Hao recalled Grand Elder Ouyang and He Luo Hua from the Reliance sect. He also thought of the other core formation cultivators from the state of Jiao. Gradually, his eyes began to gleam. I have 10 Dao pillars and a perfect foundation. I can even battle the core formation stage. I may be cut off from the spiritual power of heaven and earth, but in return, I am the most powerful person in this stage. I must continue down this path. I have a perfect foundation, next is a perfect gold core. The thought of it left him panting. As for the injury to my soul, that will just have to wait until later. He was no longer the youngster he had been when he began practicing cultivation, and now had much deeper comprehension of all that was involved with it. For example, he now knew that in the cultivation world of the southern domain, the core formation stage was divided into 3 levels. Violet as placed on top, beneath which were orange, crimson, and green, at the very bottom as mixed. Based on various methods, and the variety of latent talent, different cores could be formed. For instance, the Violet Fate Sect's Violet Qi from the east was able to produce a violet core. As for other sects and clans, they naturally had their own secret magics that gave their chosen disciples a chance to produce a violet core. Different cores would produce different core qi. Of course, the higher the level of the core, the more likely it would be to produce core qi, and sooner. Obviously, the core qi would be much more powerful as well. Generally speaking, among cultivators with a violet core, 90% would be able to cultivate core qi in the early core formation stage. For orange, crimson, and green cores, they were monochromatic cores, and would generally produce core qi during the mid-core formation stage. As for the 3 azure-masked Blacklands cultivators, they were obviously chosen, and had somehow been able to force the superior power of a violet core out of their orange cores. Regarding mixed cores, they contained a variety of colors and were the lowest of the entire stage. Of course, Meng Hao knew that when it came to the perfect core, it was gold. Just as there had been a perfect foundation pill, there was also a perfect gold core pill. After forming a violet core, and then consuming the perfect gold core pill, he would have a high likelihood of rising to a gold core. When that happened, he would have to face tribulation lightning. Before, such things had been far away for Meng Hao, but now that he had 10 perfect Dao pillars and had completed the great circle of the perfect foundation, core formation was just around the corner. He looked thoughtfully out into the windy rain. Finally, he flicked his sleeve to gather together the poison mist from within the Immortal's cave. It collected into the palm of his hand, after which he placed it into his bag of holding. Then, his body flickered as he moved off into the distance. Several days later, Meng Hao hovered in midair, frowning. On his head, the meat jelly, transformed into a hat, was jabbering on and on. Bullies. 3 bullies. Meng Hao, you're picking on me. You've taken advantage of my feelings. You're taking advantage of my assistance. It had come out 2 days ago, relentlessly requesting bullies. However, out here in the western region of the southern domain, there were no cultivators. They'd all left after the disappearance of the Dao geezer. Meng Hao hadn't been able to find any new bullies. Therefore, the meat jelly was furious. How can you be so immoral, so wrong? It's unconscionable. My bullies. My 3 bullies. The more it talked, the more wronged it sounded. Meng Hao coughed lightly. His face was unsightly, but after all those years, especially after his time in the Violet Fate sect, he had gotten used to the meat jelly's frequent harassment. Therefore, he simply allowed it to chatter on endlessly. After 3 more days of garrulous talking, the meat jelly finally paused for a moment. Meng Hao cleared his throat and began to speak. Didn't you say once that the parrot can emerge from the copper mirror after I reach core formation? He had been waiting for 3 days to be able to ask this question. Correct, the meat jelly screeched. After reaching core formation, that damned, evil, shameless, low-down, despicable bastard will appear. I've been waiting for that day for a long time. In this life, I will definitely convert it. In a frenzy, the meat jelly began to chatter away ceaselessly. Now, instead of blabbering about bullies, it was talking about the mystical parrot. Meng Hao relaxed a bit. At long last he had figured out a way to handle the meat jelly. All you had to do was keep giving it conversation topics. Usually, 1 or 2 topics later, it would forget about what it had been concerned about previously. Leading it back and forth in this way was the easiest method to deal with it. Meng Hao flew along as the meat jelly hat prattled. The buzzing went on for 7 days before it finally paused to rest for a moment. Before it could, Meng Hao said, "Who do you think is more incredible, you or that parrot?" It seemed Meng Hao's words had offended it, and it once again went crazy. Trembling, its fury rose to the heavens. Me, of course. Obviously it's grand, handsome, extraordinary, intelligent me. That shameless bastard of a bird is nothing but a bird. I'm gonna to convert it, I'm gonna knock him down. How is the Li clan patriarch doing lately? Meng Hao quickly asked. Has he been obedient? The meat jelly gaped for a moment. The Li clan patriarch? Damnation! Damnation! He hasn't been obedient at all recently. His immorality, his evil, is without limit. I have to go lecture him for a bit. It seemed to have suddenly realized how to give vent to all its anger. A bang sounded out as it disappeared in a puff of smoke into Meng Hao's bag of holding, and the mask, filled with order and sincerity. Meng Hao was finally able to breathe a long sigh of relief. At long last, some peace and quiet. He looked around. He didn't intend to immediately head back to the Violet Fate sect. Instead, he would visit some cultivator cities and find some pill auctions where he could earn some spirit stones. However, even as he was sizing up the surroundings and figuring out which direction he would travel in, his expression suddenly flickered. He looked down at his bag of holding for a moment, and then pulled out his Furnace Lord medallion. It was emitting a flickering, violet glow. He pressed down on the medallion, and suddenly an archaic voice filled his head. "Hey kid, have you had enough fun? It's time to stop fooling around. I want you back in 4 days. Trial by fire for Violet Furnace Lord promotion begins then in the Celestial Land. The frequency of these trials by fire is completely up to my mood. It starts 4 days from now, and everyone who joins has a chance to become a Violet Furnace Lord. If you don't get back ASAP, then you'll lose your chance to participate." Chapter 277. Eastern Emergence. Mountain. Meng Hao opened his eyes and stared blankly at the Furnace Lord medallion for a moment as the voice faded from his mind. For some reason, its tone made it seem that whoever was speaking was very familiar with him. The tone had been one of idle chit-chat, which left Meng Hao even more surprised. However, the voice was clearly that of a stranger. Meng Hao was sure he had never heard it before. He frowned for a moment, then transformed into a beam of light and shot forward. Before he had flown very far, he suddenly stopped and looked down at the Furnace Lord medallion. His eyes narrowed for a moment, then began to shine. Within the shining glow were bits of fury. I know who that voice belongs to. The only person who has the authority to start a trial by fire for Violet Furnace Lord promotion, completely based on his mood. Other than the Violet Furnace Lords themselves, the only person who could transmit a message from such a distance is Pill Demon. Meng Hao ground his teeth. He had really had no option but to go. My bedevilment pill. My 200 million spirit stones. Thinking about the vast amount of spirit stones made Meng Hao's heart seize with pain. It was as if someone had taken a valuable treasure right out of his pocket and dangled it in front of his face, while he was powerless to resist. Within the Violet Fate sect, Pill Demon was the only one other than the Violet Furnace Lords who might possibly know that he was Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. The bedevilment pill might be able to fool others, but definitely not Pill Demon. Considering Pill Demon's position within the Violet Fate sect, if he wanted to know something, it would be virtually impossible to keep the information from him. Actually, Meng Hao hadn't really done anything to conceal his identity as Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. He had simply not taken the initiative to proclaim who he was. After all, his original intention in participating in the pill auction was to increase his reputation a bit. He had never imagined that the bedevilment pill would cause such a stir. His subsequent caution had caused the entire southern domain to begin to speculate as to who Grandmaster Pill Cauldron really was. As he looked at the Furnace Lord medallion, he recalled the voice that had just entered his head and let out a soft sigh. Obviously, Pill Demon had known all along that he was Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. Meng Hao was suddenly furious. So you knew the whole time that I was famous in all of the southern domain. Any sect would love to have me work for them as Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. In that case, why didn't you give me my spirit stones? There was little to do about it, though. Pill Demon was like a patriarch in the East Pill Division. If he wanted to cheat him, there was really nothing Meng Hao could do about it. He couldn't simply up and demand to have spirit stones. Back in Xianxia County, the stewards were always miserly. If they weren't taking advantage of people, they took it as losing money. It seems the same principle exists in the cultivation world. The more spirit stones they have, the stingier they get. Meng Hao sighed, then once again proceeded forward in a beam of light. You owe me 200 million spirit stones. Right now I don't even have a single spirit stone left, thought Meng Hao, his face long. When he thought about his empty bag of holding, and the 200 million spirit stones, he just couldn't keep his cool. 4 days to get back to the sect. I'm much further than 4 days away right now. He sped up. Trial by fire for promotion to Violet Furnace Lord. Could batty old Pill Demon perhaps feel guilty for taking my spirit stones, so he's giving me a chance to become a Violet Furnace Lord? His eyes suddenly began to glitter, and his heart palpitated with eagerness. He knew that becoming a Violet Furnace Lord would come with a host of benefits. After 1,000 years, the Violet Fate sect currently only had 8 Violet Furnace Lords. Finally, there would be a 9th. Meng Hao began to breathe heavily, and he pushed himself even faster. 4 days. No matter what, I have to get back to the sect in 4 days. He shot off into the distance, a prismatic beam charging at high speed. He had risen to prominence in the western region. His cultivation base had climbed to new heights. Now he was being called back to the sect. All of it seemed to smack of some hidden agenda. He decided not to be concerned about the suddenness of the whole matter. He sighed again and pushed down his concerns. His cultivation base was now much different than when he had left the sect, but he could use the Dao Geyser to explain that. After considering the matter for some time, Meng Hao found it unlikely that the sect was plotting against him. After all, the Violet Fate sect was one of the great sects of the southern domain. If they really harbored ill intentions toward him and deigned to use some sort of tricks on him, then there was nothing he could do about it. They would be able to seize him with little effort. Besides, he had been in the East Pill Division for more than 5 years. He understood the sect fairly well and knew both the exceptional areas of the East Pill division, as well as its shortcomings. Thinking of all these things, his apprehension lessened quite a bit. However, he was no less cautious than ever. Taking advantage of every teleportation portal he could, he made his way back toward the Violet Fate sect. Every teleportation portal he arrived at belonged to some sect or clan. All he had to do was flash his Furnace Lord medallion and they would let him pass. They were happy to let a Furnace Lord use their teleportation devices. 4 days passed in a flash. It was late in the night of the 3rd day, in the moment when dawn of the 4th day was about to break, that Meng Hao, windswept and covered in dust, arrived in the region of the Violet Fate sect. He had passed through over 20 teleportation portals and had crossed nearly half of the southern domain. Batty old pill demon. If he gets to choose when the trial by fire starts, then why the hell did he pick 4 days? Meng Hao wasn't in a good mood, and was in fact slightly depressed. Anyone who used over 20 teleportation portals in a brief 4-day period would be just as completely exhausted. Thankfully, he had 10 Dao pillars and much stronger spiritual sense. With his previous cultivation base, being teleported so many times in such a short period of time would have left him painfully exhausted. Meng Hao would rather have spent the 4th day in meditation and rest, but had no time. The constant flying and use of teleportation portals wasn't without benefit, though. Because of the constant rotation of his cultivation base, his 10 Dao pillars were completely stable. He could now break through to core formation at any time. His breathing rough, Meng Hao shot through Violet Fate sect territory. Dawn light climbed up into the sky as he flew along. Occasionally he would encounter other cultivators who, upon seeing his clothing, would look shocked, and then respectfully clasp hands and bow to him. This was Violet Fate sect territory, so all the other sects and clans therein were connected in some way to the Violet Fate sect. As such, his clothing, and the identity they heralded, garnered deep respect. Off in the distance, he could see the Violet Fate sect and the enormous statue of Reverend Violet East. It was still early morning, but Meng Hao was worn out and in a rotten mood. As he approached the sect, the previously still air suddenly began to ripple. Meng Hao ignored the ripples, and continued to fly at top speed. The ripples spread out for a moment, and then soundlessly disappeared. These ripples would instantly slay any cultivator of the nascent soul stage or below who was not of the Violet Fate sect. Meng Hao whistled through the air within the sect. Along the way, he ran into quite a few disciples of the Violet Qi division. They looked at Meng Hao with expressions of complete astonishment. Seeing the expressions, Meng Hao got a bad feeling. Suddenly, he turned a corner and found himself face to face with a chosen disciple he knew from the Violet Qi division, who immediately said, "Fang Mu, what are you doing back?" Meng Hao paused for a moment, turning back to look at him. "Hey, Brother Song. I was out of the sect to gain some experience, but now the training is over." "You just got back from training," was the reply. "You'd better get to Eastern Emergence Mountain as fast as you can. All the Furnace Lords and Master Alchemists of the East Pill Division headed over there at dawn. The word is that there's a Violet Furnace Lord trial by fire. Eastern Emergence Mountain." An image of the mountain immediately appeared in Meng Hao's mind. It was in the eastern part of the state of Eastern Emergence, quite some distance from the Violet Fate sect. Yeah. The trial by fire for Violet Furnace Lord promotion has caused a big stir among the other great sects and clans. Members of the senior generation arrived quite some time ago to observe the proceedings. As the words were still coming out Song's mouth, Meng Hao took a deep breath, clasped hands, and then disappeared in a beam of bright light. He sent his spiritual sense out and found that there really were no master alchemists present at all within the East Pill division. He immediately shot off into the distance. "Batty old pill demon," he said through gritted teeth. "Why can't you explain things clearly?" Despite his exhaustion, he shot forward at the highest speed possible. Eastern Emergence Mountain was the most prominent mountain within the state of Eastern Emergence. It towered up into the sky, and throughout the year, its upper half was enveloped in white clouds that appeared celestial in nature. Many legends about this mountain existed within the state of Eastern Emergence. Its peak was covered with ice and snow. Mortals would be incapable of climbing up to such a place. Furthermore, the mountain was guarded year-round by Violet Fate sect cultivators, making it a restricted area. Even Violet Fate sect disciples were not allowed to climb the mountain unless they had a special command medallion. Obviously, outsiders would never be allowed onto the mountain unless some solemn Violet Fate sect matter was underway. According to one rumor, 10,000 years ago, the Violet Fate sect wasn't located where it was now, but rather on Eastern Emergence Mountain. Eventually, because of various circumstances, the sect had moved away. Regardless of that, Eastern Emergence Mountain was under constant guard by the Violet Fate sect. In fact, it was less of a restricted area and more of a holy place. Currently, an enormous pill furnace rested on the peak of the mountain. It was covered with countless protruding magical symbols, and emanated an archaic air. An air of time seemed to spread out from within, an air that felt thousands of years old. Were Meng Hao here, he would recognize this pill furnace. This was the same one that appeared in illusory form above the East Pill Division, and led into the Violet Fate Celestial Land. This was the actual pill furnace itself. Surrounding the pill furnace were the 1,000 master alchemists of the East Pill Division, the 100 Furnace Lords, and the 8 Violet Furnace Lords, including Xianxia and Lin Hailong. 1. Everyone was here. Close by were representatives of the other 4 great sects, as well as the 3 great clans, along with members from other sects who devoted themselves to alchemy. Elders from all these organizations sat cross-legged atop the mountain peak, waiting. This chapter was sponsored by Roe Treves, Alec Ray, Martin Allen Viray, Robert Kunze, and Alexander Hinz. And Zai Hai is the Violet Furnace Lord who assessed the bedevilment pill in the auction, and knows that Fang Mu is Pill Cauldron. Lin Hailong is the most senior of the Violet Furnace Lords, the one who presided over the meeting with Eternal Mountain. Chapter 278. The 10th candidate of Violet Furnace Lord promotion was not a grand occasion for the Violet Fate sect only, but rather the entire southern domain as a whole. This was not just because a Violet Furnace Lord represented a peak position of incredible height, but also because a promotion to Violet Furnace Lord was actually an apprentice-accepting ceremony of Grandmaster Pill Demon. Currently, there were 8 Violet Furnace Lords in the Violet Fate sect, and all of them were novitiates of Grandmaster Pill Demon. This ceremony was actually a way of formally becoming an apprentice. Some disciples, such as Chu Yuyan and Ding Xin, were qualified to directly become Grandmaster Pill Demon's apprentices. However, this generally didn't meet with the approval of the alchemists of the East Pill Division. Alchemists were partial to those who relied on their own hard work, who started out as apprentice alchemists, then worked their way to become master alchemists, furnace lords, and then finally apprentices of Grandmaster Pill Demon, by joining the ranks of the Violet Furnace Lords. Chu Yuyan was a bit different. Because of her skill in pill concocting, she had a good reputation in the East Pill Division. Add in her incredible beauty, and the alchemists were more easily able to accept her. Despite that, to Chu Yuyan, promotion to Violet Furnace Lord was incredibly important. She stood there in the crowd, her eyes glowing with determination. This was her chance to become a Violet Furnace Lord, and she was determined to succeed. Her gaze came to rest upon a man who was standing behind one of the Violet Furnace Lords. He was middle-aged, and his face was flawless and handsome. His expression was tranquil, and he wore the robe of a Furnace Lord. A faint medicinal aroma wafted off of him. He was clearly beyond ordinary. Within his face could be seen a hint of lonely arrogance. His expression and appearance were exactly how Chu Yuyan imagined Grandmaster Pill Cauldron to be. He will be my biggest competition for promotion to Violet Furnace Lord, she thought with an inward sigh as she looked at him. This proud, aloof man was like a chosen among the Furnace Lords. His name was Yi Feimu. 1. Among the Furnace Lords, Yi Feimu was well known as having incredible skill in the Tao of alchemy. His skill was the type only seen once in 1,000 years, and he was generally acknowledged to be the alchemist most likely to be promoted to Violet Furnace Lord. Upon joining the sect many years ago, he had immediately caused a huge stir in the East Pill Division. Furthermore, Violet Furnace Lord Yi Yunqian took special notice of his talent and showed him favor. This was mostly because they shared the same surname, Yi. 2. Yi Yunqian's name in Chinese is Ye Yuntin Yun Tin. Yi is a surname which also means leaf. Yun means cloud. Qian means sky or heaven. With assistance the entire time, he became the #1 apprentice alchemist at the time, then the #1 master alchemist. Finally, he became a furnace lord, whereupon not much was heard about him for many years. According to the rumors, his skill in the Tao of alchemy had reached the peak of the furnace lord rank, and he was halfway to being a violet furnace lord already. Even more stunning was that it wasn't just his Tao of alchemy that was so high, he had long since reached the core formation stage. He hadn't cultivated core chi yet, but many people speculated that if he hadn't devoted himself so much to alchemy, he would already be above the mid-core formation stage. In this violet furnace lord trial by fire, Yi Feimu was viewed as the most likely candidate to win. Second was Chu Yuyan. There were other candidates, but the general consensus was that the main competition would be between these two. Chu Yuyan had one advantage: she was an apprentice of Pill Demon. As for Yi Feimu, his advantage, which even Chu Yuyan had to acknowledge, was that he had the support of 90% of the Furnace Lords, as well as 5 of the Violet Furnace Lords. In addition, Pill Demon himself had praised him on past occasions. All of this really put Yi Feimu in a superior position. Even more importantly, chosen like Yi Feimu had been talked a lot about in the past year. More and more people outside the sect were spreading rumors that he was Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. Yi Feimu never made any comments on the subject, which of course caused even more rumors to spread. Soon, everyone was convinced that Pill Cauldron was none other than Yi Feimu. In fact, many people felt that the reason he sealed his pill with the cauldron was because of his name, Feimu. The characters Fei and Mu can both be seen in the character Ding. Even many of the Furnace Lords agreed with this, as well as a few of the Violet Furnace Lords, who began to pay closer attention to him because of it. Chu Yuyan was very focused on the matter of Pill Cauldron. She had even gone to visit Yi Feimu to ask about it. While he hadn't openly admitted that he was Pill Cauldron, he had vaguely implied that such was the case. How could Chu Yuyan not have understood his meaning? After finally resolving the issue, she actually felt a little bit disappointed. It was an indescribable feeling, sort of like waking to find that reality was very different from the dream world you had just been in. Even if he is Grandmaster Pill Cauldron, I will fight with everything I have to become a Violet Furnace Lord, she thought, taking a deep breath and deepening her resolve. For some strange reason, as soon as she made her mind up, the image of another person suddenly appeared in her mind. Fang Mu. Why am I thinking about him? She frowned, dispelling the image of Fang Mu from her thoughts. It was early morning on Eastern Emergence Mountain. Cool sunlight fell upon the snowy mountain peak. The enormous pill furnace emitted an archaic aura of time, and the surroundings were very quiet. The 8 Violet Furnace Lords of the East Pill Division sat cross-legged. Behind them were the Furnace Lords and Master Alchemists, over 1,000 people altogether. Also present off to the side were representatives from the other sects and clans, here to observe the ceremonies. If someone was promoted to Violet Furnace Lord, they would witness the event and then announce throughout the southern domain that there was a 9th Violet Furnace Lord, and that Grandmaster Pill Demon had accepted a new apprentice. "The hour has arrived," cried Lin Hailong, the most senior of the Violet Furnace Lords. As soon as his words rang out, the sound of bells filled the mountain peak. The clouds above roiled, forming together to form an ancient-looking face that stared down at everyone. At the same time, the enormous pill furnace began to emit a gentle glow. Multicolored beams of light shot out, twisting around to fill the entire area with brightness. From off in the distance, it looked as if the entirety of Eastern Emergence Mountain was covered by a massive, illusory pill furnace. Ripples appeared in the air, out from which a figure emerged to stand atop the pill furnace. He wore a white robe, and his features were ordinary. However, his aura was anything but. He gave off a sense of ultimate refinement. The air around him distorted as he appeared, as if he didn't quite belong in the world. The sleeves of his simple robe were embroidered with images of pill furnaces. His hair was white, and his gaze soft as he looked around at everyone. A smile appeared on his archaic face. "Fellow Taoists of the Southern Domain, many thanks for coming to attend my ceremony of accepting a new apprentice. I am unable to attend in person, so I've embodied my divine will to come in my place. I hope you can all forgive me for this." This, of course, was the man who occupied the ultimate position in the Tao of Alchemy in the Southern Domain, Grandmaster Pill Demon. His voice caused all the disciples of the East Pill Division to salute respectfully, including Master Alchemists, Furnace Lords and Violet Furnace Lords. Grandmaster Pill Demon was essentially the patriarch of the East Pill Division. Grandmaster Eternal Mountain hadn't come, but instead, Grand Elder Xiao Shifeng, whose cultivation base was at the Great Circle of the late nascent soul stage. He laughed, then coolly said, "No need to be so polite, Grandmaster Pill Demon. Accepting an apprentice and promoting a Violet Furnace Lord is a grand event for the entire Southern Domain. Xiao wouldn't think of not coming." He occupied a noble and prestigious position within the Golden Frost sect, and was nearly 900 years old, making him a sub-patriarch. He was not yet 1,000 years old, and had not defied the heavens. If in the next 100 years he could break through to the spirit severing stage, then he would truly become a patriarch. If not, then he would simply pass away in meditation and become one with the Tao. Next to him were 10 or more Golden Frost sect cultivators, including Fatty. Right now, Fatty looked extremely nervous, and didn't show the slightest hint of being lively or excited. In fact, he was acting unprecedentedly well-behaved. The person he feared the most in the entire Golden Frost sect was none other than Grand Elder Xiao. After hearing that Grandmaster Pill Demon was accepting a new apprentice, I came as fast as possible, said Patriarch Violet Civ of the Black Civ sect, smiling. Thankfully, I didn't arrive late. He sat cross-legged off to the side. Next to him was Zhu Jie as well as Han Bei, who was currently looking around, sizing up the surroundings. It seemed as if she were looking for someone. A Violet Furnace Lord promotion was a huge event, something that hadn't occurred for a very long time. It was only natural for the other great sects to show up. Also present was Daoist Wu Sheng, second of the Solitary Sword sect's 3 sword lords, who sat cross-legged, surrounded by Solitary Sword sect disciples. Chen Fan was there, as was the woman Shan Ling, 3. Shan Ling was introduced way back in chapter 180. With a slight smile, Daoist Wu Sheng said, "You're truly too polite, Grandmaster Pill Demon. For a Grandmaster to accept an apprentice is a legacy of the Tao of Alchemy that any disciple in the Southern Domain would covet. How could I not humbly come to bear witness to such an event?" His voice was calm. He was an honored senior member of the Solitary Sword sect who was qualified to look down on a myriad of other sects. However, in front of Grandmaster Pill Demon, all of his pride turned into respect. The representative from the Blood Demon sect was a withered old man in a red Daoist robe. He had silver hair, and his skin was shriveled. He emanated a thick death aura, and his eyes had no pupils, they were completely white. He didn't say anything in response to Pill Demon's words. He merely smiled and nodded his head. This blind old man was incredibly famous in the Southern Domain. He was the 3rd demon of the Blood Demon sect, Tu Luo, the Corpse Demon. The only other person from the Blood Demon sect to come to Eastern Emergence Mountain was Li Shichi. The main representatives from the 3 great clans were all of the Great Circle of the nascent soul stage. All of them said various words in response to Grandmaster Pill Demon. Afterwards Grandmaster Pill Demon smiled and said, "In total, there will be 10 cultivators participating in the Violet Furnace Lord trial by fire. Candidates, please step forward." His voice was solemn, and as it filled the mountaintop, Chu Yuyan, Yi Feimu, and 7 other Furnace Lords stepped out from the crowd one by one. They walked over to stand in front of the Pill Furnace. Including Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu, there were only 9 alchemists standing there, not the 10 of which Pill Demon had spoken. The cultivators of the East Pill Division immediately noticed this, as did the representatives of the other sects. Chu Yuyan and the other candidates for Violet Furnace Lord promotion exchanged glances, silently wondering who the 10th participant was. Before anyone could say anything, a beam of light appeared in the distance. It shot through the air toward the mountain peak, then transformed into a panting Meng Hao. Everyone looked over at him, although he didn't care about that. He glanced around, and immediately noticed Chu Yuyan and the other 8 standing in front of the Pill Furnace, as well as Grandmaster Pill Demon. As far as Meng Hao was concerned, Pill Demon was just some old man that he didn't recognize. "The 10th candidate has arrived," said Grandmaster Pill Demon, his expression the same as ever. "Fang Mu, step on over." Hearing this, Meng Hao walked over without hesitation to join the other 9. Then he looked up at Pill Demon, bottling up his frustration and helplessness. Yi Feimu's name in Chinese is Yi Feimu Yi Fei Mu. Yi is a surname which also means leaf. Fei is a negation word that basically means not. Mu means Ai Yunqian's name in Chinese is Ye Yuntin Yun Tin. Yi is a surname which also means leaf. Yun means cloud. Qian means sky or heaven. Chapter 279. Opening the pill furnace. The voice that Meng Hao had just heard was exactly the same voice he had heard coming from the Furnace Lord Medallion 4 days ago. Considering that, as well as the expressions on everyone's faces, how could Meng Hao not come to the conclusion that this person was none other than the illustrious Grandmaster Pill Demon? In Meng Hao's eyes, Grandmaster Pill Demon looked completely ordinary. He did not possess the demeanor of a transcendent being, nor did he emanate some powerful, domineering fierceness. He looked just like a regular old man. Then, Meng Hao thought about the 200 million spirit stones, and his mood worsened. Of course, he couldn't mention anything about that now. Next, he thought about how he had been told to return in 4 days, but hadn't been told where to go. He had rushed over to the sect only to be forced to scramble back in the opposite direction. It had left him completely drained. All of these depressing thoughts caused Meng Hao's expression to flicker with a bit of anger and frustration. Chu Yuyan looked at him and let out a light snort. She looked away, ignoring him, gazing instead at Yi Feimu. Meng Hao stood there by himself, silently. Most of the other 7 just glanced at him, and then paid him no further attention as they focused on not allowing excitement regarding the Violet Furnace Lord promotion to show on their face. And Zai Hai looked over at Meng Hao, and a barely perceptible smile touched his face. He knew that Fang Mu was Grandmaster Pill Cauldron, and he also knew how his master felt about the young man. Pill Demon had given Fang Mu free rein to enjoy himself in the sect, and as far as the identity of Grandmaster Pill Cauldron, if Fang Mu wanted to reveal it himself, he could. If he didn't want to, that was his business. As far as the representatives from the other sects and clans, Patriarch Violet Civ was the first one to give a friendly nod to Meng Hao. Zhu Jie's face was expressionless, but when Han Bei looked at him, she smiled, her face as beautiful as a flower. The look she gave him was noticed by quite a few others. Chu Yuyan glanced over and saw it, and then frowned, although she wasn't sure why. For some reason, she just was not in a good mood. Fatty's eyes were wide as he looked at Meng Hao, then Chu Yuyan and then back to Meng Hao. Finally he glanced at Han Bei out of the corner of his eyes, and his expression filled with admiration. As for what he was thinking, only he himself knew. The representative from the Wang clan was an old woman, her face covered with wrinkles. So, this is the alchemist Fang who rose to fame a few days ago in the western region. Behind the old woman, other Wang clan members sat cross-legged, including Wang Tengfei. His expression was somber, and the entire time, he hadn't even looked once at Chu Yuyan. She reacted to this with utmost calm, and not the least bit of negativity. It seemed as if she had placed the matters from previous years completely behind her. A hero at such a young age? Someone laughed from within the Song clan representatives. It was none other than eccentric Song, who sat far off toward the edge. He laughed again as he looked Meng Hao up and down, measuring him up. Sitting around him were a dozen or so members of the Song clan. Song Yunshu wasn't there, but Song Jiao was. She, of course, was Meng Hao's fiancée, at least theoretically speaking. There she was sitting right next to eccentric Song. Meng Hao hadn't seen her for years now. She was slim and graceful, with an elegant expression on her face. She was beautiful, like an orchid in full bloom. However, there was a slight furrow in her brow caused by years of gloomy thoughts. It made her entire person seem like an orchid, but a dark one. The Li clan representative was a senior member of the clan, Li Guobang, who was over 500 years of age, and had a cultivation base at the late nascent soul stage. He was incredibly powerful and influential within the Li clan. Congratulations, Grandmaster Pill Demon, your Violet Fate sect really has produced some amazing disciples. Sitting next to Li Guobang amidst the other Li clan disciples, was Li Daoyi, who frowned as he looked over at Meng Hao. Grandmaster Pill Demon smiled, but didn't respond to any of the comments. He looked over Meng Hao and the 9 others. Hailong, please explain the rules. With that, he stepped off to the side and sat down cross-legged. Lin Hailong, the most senior ranking of the Violet Furnace Lords, hastily stood up. He clasped hands and bowed to Grandmaster Pill Demon, then turned toward Meng Hao and the others. Violet Furnace Lord promotion is about more than just collecting medicinal plants, concocting pills, memorizing formulas, testing the cultivation base and gauging the Tao of alchemy. It is a trial by fire. I myself have experienced this trial by fire, as have all of the other Violet Furnace Lords you see here today. Only by rising above your peers can you achieve the rank of Violet Furnace Lord. However, since ancient times, the East Pill division of the Violet Fate sect has held a Violet Furnace Lord test 79 times. Down to this day, only 17 of those tests resulted in a successful promotion. In other words, in the other 62 tests, all the candidates failed, unable to make the furnace turn violet. Therefore, despite being qualified to participate in this trial by fire, there is a 70% possibility that you will fail. A serious look was written on his face as he slowly looked over Meng Hao and the others, one by one. Meng Hao's face was placid. He was physically tired, but also excited. He had previously read that throughout the history of the Violet Fate sect, there had only been 17 alchemists promoted to Violet Furnace Lord. 2 of them ended up forsaking the sect, one of whom was Eternal Mountain, the other was surnamed Liu. Of the 15 others, in the past 1,000 years, 5 had perished. 2 left the sect to gain experience, and then disappeared without a trace. Grandmaster Pill Demon had personally searched for them, but hadn't been able to turn up a single clue. The only thing he was certain of was that they weren't dead. For some reason, though, they had disappeared from the southern domain. Lin Hailong continued, even if you fail, you will be able to seize good fortune within the test. During the Violet Furnace Lord trial by fire, your life will not be in any danger. But, you may only participate in this test once in your life. If you fail, you will never get a second chance. Therefore, since ancient times, many alchemists have left personally created pill formulas and other personal information about the Tao of alchemy within the test. These things have been passed down within the test for many years, available only to those qualified to participate in the test. For example, I remember how I personally left behind information regarding my understanding and speculations of the 3 mortalities pill. Lin Hailong's eyes filled with a look of recollection for a moment. The location of the trial by fire is a mountain in the celestial land. At the base of the mountain is the Mother of Furnaces. This Mother of Furnaces is the first stroke of good fortune of the 10 of you will encounter. Inside, you will find your own life furnace. More precisely, at the same time that you select a furnace, that furnace will be selecting you. To complete the test, you must make your life furnace turn violet. If you do that, and are able to ascend to the peak of the mountain, then you will earn the right to be called Violet Furnace Lord. Unfortunately, only one person can earn such a right. If more than one person is able to reach the peak, then the final decision will be made by the Furnace Lords and the Violet Furnace Lords. Their approval will be critical in the decision of who becomes the next Violet Furnace Lord. Lin Hailong gave deep, meaningful looks to Meng Hao and the others as he spoke his final words. The pill furnace behind you is a precious treasure forged thousands upon thousands of years ago by Reverend Violet East. Inside is a celestial land, and a towering celestial mountain. There are 10 paths on the mountain, which is divided into 4 regions. Each of the 4 regions contains different trials and tests. Use your Tao of alchemy to pass through them. Based on your achievements, the color of your furnaces will darken. I must remind you, everything you do within the trial by fire will be seen clearly by everyone on the outside. Do your best. I truly hope that this trial by fire will result in one of you becoming my 9th junior brother in the East Pill division. With that, he turned to look at Pill Demon. Pill Demon gave a slight nod. Lin Hailong flicked his wide sleeve and said, "Chant the alchemy scripture to open the pill furnace." As his voice rang out, the eyes of all the alchemists, Furnace Lord and Violet Furnace Lord alike, immediately closed. Their lips moved slightly, and an indistinct sound filled the air. It was impossible to understand or hear clearly. Even a nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be able to comprehend it. Only alchemists of the East Pill division would be able to make out that this mysterious so-called alchemy scripture was none other than the alchemy Tao transmutation incantation. Seemingly in sync with the droning sound, Eastern Emergence Mountain began to shake. Multicolored light spread out everywhere, filling the sky. Countless faces suddenly appeared within the clouds, their expressions dignified. From their mouths emerged indistinct symbols. The sound echoed about, causing the sky to be filled with bright colors. The land around the mountain was peaceful. However, a mist sprang up, with Eastern Emergence Mountain at its center. It roiled out rapidly, quickly covering the entire state of Eastern Emergence. All the land and all the living things in it were submerged within the mist. As the mist spread out, Violet Chi Division disciples flew out in all directions to keep guard and maintain peace. Up in the sky, colorful lights danced about, beneath which, clouds and mist covered the land like a sea. Eastern Emergence Mountain rose up from it like an island, towering up. Far off in the distance, the enormous statue of Reverend Violet East also towered up above the sea of clouds, looking, not like a mountain, but an enormous giant watching over the land. The pill furnace is opened. Enter, cried Lin Hailong. The pill furnace emitting buzzing sounds. In the blink of an eye, its side began to ripple and grow transparent. It looked almost like a waterfall. Yi Feimu took a deep breath, and then stepped into the pill furnace, the first one to do so. He disappeared into the rippling water, followed by Chu Yuyan, whose eyes radiated determination. Meng Hao looked back at Grandmaster Pill Demon, who sat there cross-legged, his eyes closed. Without a word, and without the slightest hesitation, he entered the waterfall. Coldness filled his body, and it began to grow transparent. He disappeared. The other 7 candidates entered as well, vanishing immediately. Although it might seem like these 7 were people of little note, in reality, to be qualified to participate in the trial by fire showed how extraordinary they were. Such qualifications meant that they were inherently famous, the best of the best in terms of both personality and the Tao of alchemy. Chapter 280, Life Furnace, Violet Fate Celestial Land, the holiest place in the sect. There were many legends regarding this particular celestial land. All of them, however, had something to do with the almighty Reverend Violet East, who had founded the sect tens of thousands of years ago. Many years after the sect's founding, this celestial land gradually came to be the location where the Violet Fate sect grew its medicinal herbs. Eventually more types of medicinal plants came to grow there than in the entire rest of the southern domain put together. That was the location of the East Pill Division's Tao Reserve. Within the Violet Fate Celestial Land, at the far end of the limitless stretches of medicinal plant fields, was a mountain so tall it seemed to have no top. This mountain, which could be seen from an incredible distance, was known as Violet East Mountain. According to one legend, in his later years, Reverend Violet East sat atop this mountain and slowly passed away in meditation. Afterward it became a place of pilgrimage. At the foot of the mountain was an enormous pill furnace glowing with a 7-colored light. It looked exactly the same as the furnace on top of Eastern Emergence Mountain, except somehow more real. It emanated an archaic aura. Suddenly, the air at the foot of the mountain began to ripple like liquid. Multiple figures emerged, and when the ripples faded away, Meng Hao, Chu Yuyan, Yi Feimu and the others were all there. In front of them was the shockingly high mountain. Starting at the foot of the mountain, 10 small paths zigzagged up toward the top. Each path began there, and then took different routes to the top. As to which path to select, that would be based on the feeling each candidate got from the paths. In any case, it was easy to see that there was little difference in the difficulty of traversing the various paths. Meng Hao looked up toward the peak of the imposing mountain. Its higher regions were blurry, and it was actually impossible to see the peak itself. Nor was it actually possible to even estimate how tall the mountain was. Meng Hao wasn't the only one looking up at it. The other 9 people around him, including Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu, were gazing toward it. Other than the 10 paths, the main thing that filled their vision was the enormous pill furnace. After some time passed, Yi Feimu's eyes glittered with determination. He turned to glance over at the others. His gaze did not come to rest upon any of them. His supercilious expression seemed to say that he knew he would become a Violet Furnace Lord, and that none of the other candidates were able to match up to him. His pride and dignity seemed to fill him with 100% confidence that this title of Violet Furnace Lord belonged only to him. He shot toward the pill furnace and sat down cross-legged in the spot directly east of it. Chu Yuyan looked at him and took a deep breath. Her eyes also filled with the glow of determination. You might be Grandmaster Pill Cauldron, who I admire so much, but now the time has come for me to go up against you. Closing her eyes, she sat down next to the pill furnace. After her, Meng Hao and the others approached and selected various positions to sit down. The first phase of the competition had begun. It was time for the candidates to acquire their life furnaces. Meng Hao had no clue how to actually get the furnace. However, as soon as the 10 of them sat down cross-legged around the 7-colored pill furnace, the glow around it began to flicker, and then suddenly shot out toward the candidates. A tremor ran through Meng Hao's body, and he suddenly sensed something calling to him, murmuring within his mind. He reached out to touch it with spiritual sense, and suddenly his mind reeled, and he felt as if he had lost contact with his body. He could no longer see the mountain or the celestial land. Instead, a strange world stretched out in front of his eyes. It was boundless and filled with curling mists. A 6-colored glow was everywhere, a glow that was missing the color violet. It pierced through the mists, shining everywhere. Meng Hao looked at everything mutely. He couldn't feel his body, but he was somehow there. He suddenly realized that by concentrating, he could move. His body was not here in this world, only his will. The world sped by in front of him as he shot through the mists. As he moved, occasional beams of bright light would shoot past him. It seemed like this place had no end. Everything was a blur. Inside the celestial land, beneath the mountain, next to the pill furnace, Meng Hao sat there cross-legged. His expression seemed to be constantly changing, as if he were lost in a dream. All of the others around him looked exactly the same. Their expressions seemed to flicker with surprise, confusion, and thoughtfulness. Meanwhile, outside of the Violet Fate celestial land, atop Eastern Emergence Mountain, 10 glowing, richly colored screens suddenly blossomed up out of the pill furnace. Images gradually became clear on the screens, depicting each of the people within the trial by fire. As they sat there cross-legged, their expressions were clearly visible to all of the alchemists of the East Pill Division who sat on the mountaintop, as well as the representatives from the other sects and clans who had come to observe the proceedings. Each and every action of the 10 within the celestial land was clearly visible to everyone. The mountaintop was peaceful, and everyone seemed to be dividing their attention between the 10 various screens. Lin Hailong looked at them and murmured to himself, "Every Violet Furnace Lord trial by fire requires the candidates to proceed through 4 regions and face 4 tests. However, before facing the tests, they must acquire their personal life furnaces. The life furnace is the key. The type of furnace acquired will depend completely on the good fortune of the alchemist." Meng Hao lost track of time as he proceeded on through the endless emptiness. All he could see was mist, and the 6-colored glow. There was nothing else. After a very long time had passed, Meng Hao was starting to feel tired. Suddenly, a violet glow flickered up ahead of him. Meng Hao peered forward. His attention was seized by this violet glow that suddenly appeared in a world which lacked violet. The violet glow didn't move, but just sat there, flickering. Suddenly, a pill furnace became visible within the glow, about the size of an infant's fist. Magical symbols circulated around the pill furnace, which emanated a violet light. Just as Meng Hao's will moved forward to touch the pill furnace, it suddenly shot backward, streaming magical symbols. Before Meng Hao could get any closer, it sped off into the distance. Meng Hao muttered to himself for a moment, then proceeded forward. Not much time passed before he caught sight of another violet glow, within which was another pill furnace. It looked a bit different than the other one, as it had 3 legs. However, as Meng Hao approached, it too disappeared off into the distance. So, Meng Hao thought to himself, "I have to select a furnace, and the furnace has to select me." He decided to stop moving, and instead calmed himself and settled his will. "I'll use my Tao of alchemy to communicate with this world created by the Mother of Furnaces. I will search the emptiness for the life furnace that is fated to belong to me." With that, he figuratively closed his eyes. Time passed, a very, very long time. Meng Hao gradually grew calmer. Soon, within his mind, he saw 9 spheres of will. These 9 spheres were the other candidates within the trial by fire. He could sense them, and they, in turn, could sense him. It was a strange feeling. They couldn't see each other, but they could feel each other. Meng Hao and the other 9 relied on their Tao of alchemy to sense this world, and to attempt to draw out their own personal life furnace. Gradually, Meng Hao could see one beam of glowing light after another appearing around the other 9 people. Chu Yuyan had attracted 7 or 8 pill furnaces of various colors. As for Yi Feimu, he had dozens spinning around him. All of them seemed to desire to be selected by him. The other people had 2 or 3 at the minimum. Meng Hao was the only person who only had 1 pill furnace in front of him. His heart sank momentarily before he calmed himself. In my Tao of alchemy, he thought, my body is the pill furnace and my heart is the pill formula. Few people can conform to this philosophy, therefore, it is difficult for me to attract a suitable life furnace. He began to murmur, sending his will out in all directions. Pill furnaces, if you follow me, you will reach the pinnacle. Come with me, and become eternal. Suddenly an almost countless number of glowing lights appeared throughout the nothingness of the world. More than 10,000 of them flickered in all corners of the world. The pill furnaces trembled, as if they were reacting to Meng Hao's voice. In my Tao of alchemy, my body is the furnace and my heart is the formula. I will refine all the myriads of things in nature. I will refine the transformations of the sun and moon. Such a refining requires a furnace, my life furnace. Follow me for a life of transformation. His will surged out, growing stronger, increasing the number of pill furnaces that reacted to him to over 100,000. Half among them began to quiver violently, seemingly excited, and yet hesitating. I vow that whichever pill furnace follows me will never be destroyed. It will never shatter. His will echoed out, growing even stronger. Among the 50,000 trembling pill furnaces, 10,000 of them began to emit droning noises. I vow that whichever pill furnace follows me will concoct medicinal pills of the stars, and will give birth to pill spirit. This is my personal vow. His will soared, and in that instant, within the 10,000 pill furnaces, 1,000 began to drone even louder, and emit even brighter, glittering auras. I vow that whichever pill furnace belongs to me, when I achieve my Tao, it will incarnate a body. His will thundered out. Among the 1,000 pill furnaces was a violet furnace which suddenly shot out of nowhere, heading directly toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's formless eyes opened, and in front of him, he saw a 9-legged violet furnace. It shone with a flickering, violet glow as it floated in the air in front of him. Magical symbols emanated off of it. It was obvious from a mere glance that it was completely beyond ordinary. This is the life furnace which belongs to me, selected from within the void. Meng Hao's eyes shone brightly, and he slowly lifted up his hand to take hold of the furnace. It was at this exact moment that suddenly, a powerful screaming noise shook the entire world. The pill furnace in front of Meng Hao began to tremble, as did all the pill furnaces hovering around the other 9 candidates. They all seemed terrified. Something violent and shocking was about to happen. This chapter was sponsored by Robert Kunze.